This is your place for all things Detroit Red Wings and all things Chicago Blackhawks. With your hosts, Jordan Linscott, David Barnhouse, Nick LePage, and Tim Stompanato. This is the Stick Blade Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, on this edition of the Stick Blade Podcast, we have a very special guest with us tonight. He is the Detroit Red Wings go-to writer for The Athletic. He has written for ample teams, including the University of Michigan, where he covered, I believe, his basketball and football. He has written for a number of different publications, including, I believe, Sporting News, sorry. You can catch his podcast, Wings for Breakfast, through The Athletic. Fantastic writer all around. Everybody, welcome to the show, Max Bultman.
Welcome. Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm. So, Max, you're the Red Wings go-to writer for the Red Wings right now, and I mean, The Athletic, what you guys are doing for sports, like news and journalism, is very different than what a lot of outlets do. You guys are a subscription-based service, which means you guys, I feel like, put out better content than a lot of other news outlets do. You guys have like dedicated podcasts and stuff like that. What's that sort of experience been like for you, just as like a professional in that regard?
Well, it's really nice of you to say. I've loved working there. I mean, it's here, I should say. I mean, it's obviously it was my first full-time job out of college, so I don't, I don't know too different, but it's been an unbelievable place to work and a lot of room and space to kind of try creative things. And I've loved working at The Athletic.
Okay. Now, obviously, you're writing for the Detroit Red Wings, mainly on The Athletic for like the pieces that I seem to be reading. Just in general, what is that like getting to cover a professional sports team and just having like those contacts that you can talk to and like really get insider information with? Because it's kind of a Wizard of Oz thing for you, I think, maybe, where like you get a look behind the curtain that a lot of us don't really get.
That's interesting way to put it. I mean, it's I certainly like my job. I mean, it's a fun thing day to day to be at the rink. And I grew up playing hockey, and so that aspect of it is fun too. Like you kind of get to see some things that maybe when you were a kid you would have, what's it like to go to these road games and see the road arenas and all that stuff. So I really enjoy it, and it's you do learn some things that are pretty cool along the way. But to me, like the coolest thing about it is you have these curiosities that you develop, and when you're able to be in a position to ask a question, hopefully you can find something close to an answer to some of those things. And certainly not always. There's plenty of unanswered questions that you have, and that's kind of, I guess, what keeps you going. But I mean, I like being around sports. I think it kind of, it's what I like to do in my free time too. Is I play a lot of fantasy football and stuff like that, and so I mean, it very much is a dream job for sure.
Okay. Now, obviously, the Red Wings are in the middle of a rebuild right now. I mean, that's sort of the progress that they've basically put out to us. Management has said this is a rebuilding phase, that the playoffs aren't really in like the scope right now. The World Juniors actually just happened. Sweden just wrapped up their game with the World Juniors. Just in terms of the Red Wings, what do you really are thinking are the big takeaways for them from the World Juniors? Because I mean, Lucas Raymond looked very good. If Moritz Seider had been there for Germany, I think he'd have been the standout defenseman for sure. He's been tearing it up in the Swedish league. I mean, what are your sort of takeaways for Detroit from the World Juniors tournament this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just getting started. So Christmas Day was the beginning, and so Sweden's played a couple games now. That's where most of the Red Wings prospects are. So they'll play, could be 5 more depending on how far they go. So 2 games in, I think, they have 5 prospects for Team Sweden. That's, like you mentioned, Lucas Raymond, Albert Johansson's a defenseman who they took in the second round in 2019, Theodor Niederbach, second round centerman they took this year, and then a couple of 6th round picks from the 2019 draft, Elmer Soderblom and Gustav Berglund, all playing for Sweden. And so of that group, I think Raymond's been as advertised. You never know how much someone's going to kind of light up the score sheet, but I think he's been pretty dangerous early on. Maybe the surprise might be Soderblom. Although I don't know how surprising it is in this environment. He's like depending on who you ask, he's between 6'6" and 6'8". And so in a U20 tournament, you do expect him to be able to kind of, impose his size and make a lot of opportunities. Certainly, I think it's fair to say he's done that. I think it is important to remember that we're looking at junior tournaments here. And so, is he going to be doing that? If he were in the NHL today, no. I mean, it's an advantage that he has kind of uniquely in this kind of environment. But he's been certainly a standout. There's no doubt about that. And then you look at through the rest of the tournament, they've got two other prospects. Emil Viro from Finland is a defenseman who they took this year in the third round. And Jan Bednar, who's a goalie they took in the fourth round for the Czech Republic. He hasn't played yet. I'm not sure that he will. It seems like, the Czech goalie the other night who shut out Russia, Parik was outstanding. And so, that position looks like it's probably shored up for the Czechs there for the tournament. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the way, I think you're watching those Swedes mostly and Emil Viro in Finland. I think you're looking to see, how good does Raymond look when they start playing against these top teams, when they get the US, when they get Russia. And similarly, how can some of those later round prospects, it's one thing to put up some points against Austria or even the Czech Republic, which, did just shut out Russia. So that's actually a pretty good accomplishment for Sweden. It had a 7-1 win over the Czechs the other day. Different goalies were in the net for those, but you want to see all these prospects against the very best of their age group. That means seeing them against the US, seeing them against Russia, and depending on how the bracket falls when they get to the elimination round, obviously against Canada.
Okay. Now, this is also we're a unique podcast. You cover the Red Wings and the Blackhawks. The Hawks actually have Lukas Reichel playing for Germany. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to watch them very much. Just if you've gotten the chance, what have you sort of thought of him? Because he was the player that Chicago picked this year in the first round, and there were a lot of question marks surrounding him, but I think a lot of Hawks fans have hope for him as well.
I don't believe Reichel's at the tournament. I think
he's not.
Oh, he's not at the tournament?
I think he had to stay home.
Okay.
Yeah,
He had COVID for a bit, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, outside of the World Juniors also, I mean, the Wings have a couple prospects who just got called. I mean, I guess prospects is technically the correct term, but in particular, Michael Rasmussen, Gustav Lindstrom, who is a full-timer or looks like he might be a full-timer with Detroit, Filip Zadina and Filip Hronek from the Czech Republic League all got pulled back. So it looks like Detroit's probably moving towards them being at least taxi players for this upcoming season. What are your thoughts on just this whole taxi system that the league's going to be letting teams have, and also just the schedule? Because these teams are going to get to play back-to-back now. You're going to see, I feel like, a lot more refined specialty teams in particular. Just what are your thoughts on that, given the season that we're looking at?
Well, yeah, first of all, I guess we'll see whether, what happens with Rasmussen and Lindstrom. I mean, they could make the roster. I would say I wouldn't guess that happens. Maybe their taxi squad early in the year, but I also think the Red Wings are going to try to keep their young players playing regularly, where the taxi squad, they're kind of there in case of emergency. They're practicing with the team. That's obviously good, but I get the sense, and Steve Yzerman really has said that he likes players playing games. And that probably means, if the American League is able to start up and get a regular season going, and last I saw, I think that their date was February 5th that they were targeting. I would anticipate that the Red Wings try to send players there before, young players specifically there, before relying on the taxi squad. But there is a gap between January 14th, the Red Wings' first game, and even that that target date for the AHL of February 5th. So I guess for that window, it could make some sense for the young players to be on the taxi squad and practicing with the big club. But overall, I mean, the taxi squad is just kind of it's a necessity for all these teams, right? In order to make a season work under these conditions in a pandemic, they need to have kind of that safety net. And so, I mean, the way the system will work is, it's just kind of, teams are allowed to have players travel with them or practice with them if they want. And obviously keep them kind of closer to fresh, I guess. And then if they need them, they can plug them into the active roster in a pinch in a way that's maybe easier than it would be, if you're on the road trying to get someone to where you are from the AHL. maybe a little more challenging. So really, it's just kind of a necessity to pull off a season like this. And so it will be interesting to see how different teams manage it. I'm sure some teams will opt for maybe a younger player or two in their taxi squad as they try to work them in, and others may be opting more for veterans who maybe they're not quite as intent on long-term developing, and they're kind of doing it more for that express purpose.
Okay. David, we were kind of talking earlier before the show about a player, Joe Veleno in particular. I mean, he played in Grand Rapids last year for a little bit. You want to go ahead and just talk about him for a second and ask Max your questions?
Yes. So I'm a huge Joe Veleno fan. Like, if you people listen to the show, I always talk like, "Oh, Joe Veleno's the greatest player ever." Like, most Joe thinks that, but he like scored 60 something goals. In the OHL was it? No,
He was in the queue in Quebec.
Q in the Q. Yeah. Um, do you see him wearing the winged wheel this upcoming season, and do you see him developing into a top six player?
Yeah, two good questions. This season, I don't know. It's he's obviously in Malmo until the end of their season. Their season could end fairly early. They're not a very good team over in Sweden, or at least haven't been a very successful team. So he could come back over to North America at that point. You'd think mid to late March. Maybe there's still, I don't know what the quarantine rules will be at that time, obviously. And, depending on how he plays between now and then, could I see him getting a look in Detroit? I don't think it's impossible, certainly, but you've also got a guy like Michael Rasmussen, who we mentioned a minute ago, plays the same position or potentially plays the same position at center. You'd think he's been playing a little bit of wing over in Sweden lately. Veleno has, but so he's still gonna have to win a job at that point. I don't think they're gonna hand him a job, and he didn't blow the doors off in Grand Rapids. I don't think he's blowing the doors off in Malmo. I think he does look like a good player though, and so. Is it this year? Is it next year? I don't know. I do think it's probably sooner than later. But in the next year to year and a half, I would think it's reasonable to think you'll see Joe Veleno at least in the lineup at some point. I don't know if that's full time yet or what. As for long term top six, personally, I wouldn't bet on it if the Red Wings can get where they're trying to get. I mean, you look at where they are at right now. They've got Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Zadina are kind of their top six of the future pieces that are already in place. Lucas Raymond, they're trying to get there. If Veleno plays center, I don't think it's unreasonable to think he could play some second line center. I don't think he'd be kind of a top end second line center though. And certainly championship teams tend to have two first line caliber centers. And so as the Red Wings try to get where they're going, I would anticipate that they're going to probably need a center closer to Dylan Larkin's level, if not even better, kind of a superstar center there to round out that core. Now, if Veleno does transition to the wing, then I don't see a reason that he can't, take some shifts up there and maybe even develop into the kind of player who you can flex out there and count on, really good energy, great hustle, great defense. And I think Joe Veleno is, a smart player. And I think he can contribute to a top six. I don't think he's going to drive a top six line. And that's where my hesitancy would be. But, you look at the way that the Red Wings have deployed players in the last few years. And certainly Joe Veleno, I think is a good enough player that he could fit on a first or second line, as a complementary player. But in terms of one of the kind of your top six scoring forwards, if the Red Wings can become a contender, I guess I wouldn't predict that Veleno's in that one of those top six scorers per se, but I think he can be a really valuable piece on a team. And you always need you can't just rely on having one or two scoring lines in the NHL and expect to win. So if you have a third line center who's like Joe Veleno, or even if he ends up playing wing and it's a middle six wing or whatever that may be, he's a two-way player. He can score, he can pass, he can defend. Those are all great traits. And I do think Joe Veleno is going to have an NHL career. As to that question of ceiling, that's a different matter. And frankly, I'm someone who believes a lot of that is in the hands of the player, and you can push your ceiling the better you can get. So right now, would I predict it? No, but I don't like to put kind of caps on people until you have to. And so it's not what I predict, but Veleno's a talented player.
So I want to touch on something you said a bit ago, where the Wings are going. I've been following the Wings since I was a little kid, grew up to the Russian 5. I bought a Sergei Fedorov jersey with allowance money in an adult size so I could wear it when I was an adult because I loved him so much. So I've lived through the good times, and now we're living through the hard times. Um, how do you think the rebuild's going, and how long do you think it's going to take before the Wings can be that challenging team again, where people hate us again? You know,
Million
we were a
dollar
team that
question. Million dollar question there, David. How long is it going to take is, again, in a lot in the hands of the Red Wings players and the Red Wings management. I mean, I think there's, if you want to get to that place, what you're talking about, where you're a feared, hated team, you can't take a shortcut to it. And if you do take a shortcut, you're probably not going to stay that way long, because that probably means spending big money. You're going to put yourself right up against the cap, and then you're going to have to start making moves you probably don't want to make. And you know, you guys are also a Hawks podcast, so you'll be able to kind of know that sometimes when you're up against the cap, maybe you make a move, then you regret it a couple years later.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that happens, and it's no shade at the Blackhawks. It happens to teams all over the league all the time. Tampa Bay Lightning just won a cup. If Nikita Kucherov had not gotten injured and had to go on LTI, we're going to have to make some really tough decisions with that. And part of it comes with success, but you want to build it as sustainably as possible. And that means, you know, trying to kind of just do it piece by piece. And that basically means drafting and developing. You know, there's other things you can do. You can make shrewd signings. I think the Red Wings actually made some good signings this offseason, but none of these guys that they signed, whether it's Bobby Ryan, Vladislav Nemesnikov, John Merrill, Troy Stetcher, you know, good players. I wouldn't say they're core players to a championship team. You know, they're complementary players, and you have to keep finding those complementary players, because as you find your stars, they're expensive, and you can't have a team full of stars because there's a salary cap, and that's the way the league is built. So the Lightning might be as close as we get for some time. You know, they really do have a pretty remarkable roster, and the reason for that is guys taking salaries that they might be able to get a little more than elsewhere. And so how long is it going to take? I think you see the Red Wings in the playoffs probably 3 years from now. Maybe if a couple things go right, it's 2 years from now, and that'd be, you know, the 2022 playoffs. Certainly, I think they should be trying to get there around then. I mean, they've got Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, Tyler Bertuzzi. I know there's some people who think, you know, you should kind of even set the timeline back even further, but I'm someone who believes that you can try to merge these windows a little bit. And when you have players like that who are this young, 24, 25, 26, you got to do what you can to get yourself in position to win and win sustainably before they're like over the 31, 32-year-old line. And I think the Red Wings have plenty of time to build something in that window. And so, you know, I kind of see 2022, 2023 as a reasonable, realistic window for when the Red Wings are in the playoffs again. And, you know, as teams of all kinds of hockey teams know, just getting in is just one step, and then you got to go through the wars and find a way to build your winner. So it's going to be a lot of drafting, a lot of developing. They have to hit on those picks, both in the first round and beyond. And then more importantly, or at least as importantly, they have to help get the most out of the guys that they do pick, because none of this is automatic. You can pick a guy first overall, and if he doesn't get any better from the day you draft him, he's probably not an NHL superstar or even close to it. So that's a long answer and an unsatisfying answer, but I think it's the truest answer I've got.
It is what it is.
Yep.
It is what it is.
I want to get your thoughts on this upcoming season with the realignment, and will we be seeing the Hawks Wings battle for last place in the Central?
We might, honestly. Yeah, I mean, the Hawks goalie situation's tough, right? Like, I think that's going to give them some problems, but they still have Patrick Kane. Kirby Doc's going to miss a lot of time this season. They've got Taves, DeBrincat. Have they gotten Strome re-signed yet?
Not yet.
They'll get it
still
done.
waiting on it.
They'll get it done, and they're going to score some goals. They just might play a lot of 6-5 games in either direction, you know, and so that's going to be fun. You're going to have a lot of fun watching
Absolutely.
And frankly, with where they're at, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world if they're battling the Red Wings for last place in that division. And maybe they get Owen Power out of it, who played for the Chicago Steel, played defense. He's at Michigan right now. You know, 6'5" defenseman who should go in the top 3 to 5 of this draft, if not first overall, which could happen too. So it's very conceivable. I think they're going to play some fun games against each other this year, but really, I think Chicago's just going to have a lot of shootouts.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, yeah, those are the kind of games that you just love watching. They're a lot of fun. They're high paced. They're, you know, heart attacks waiting to happen, but that's a lot of fun. You brought up a really good point when you were talking about the rebuild with Detroit about merging windows. Chicago is now going through their own version of a declared rebuild. It's a little different than what we're seeing in Detroit, with the fact that we have Kane, Tays, Keith, Seabrook. We've still got our old core, and now we've got these young kids coming up, and I think that they've been trying to retool for a couple years. What are your thoughts on this sort of modified rebuild where you're trying to shuffle two windows together, but you don't have the flexibility of a full rebuild?
Yeah, it's interesting. How old are Kane and Taves right now? 31?
32 and
32?
31.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a little tougher of a trick to pull, because they kind of have a tighter timeline to do it on if those guys are going to be a part of it. Now, are they going to be a part of it long term, or is this going to be, the Red Wings still had Henrik Zetterberg kind of when they drafted Dylan Larkin, at least certainly, and once the playoff streak ended, Zetterberg wasn't around too much longer after that, and that's kind of the formal rebuild years for the Red Wings. But it's tough to thread that needle when you have true superstars, and especially once they're getting up there in years, and you're in 32, 33 territory. It's just tougher. I mean, Kirby Dach's going to help a ton. A great center who I think is going to be a number one center in the NHL for a lot of years. They're going to get a good player, you would think, at the top of this draft. If they end up finishing, I think where it sounds like we maybe think they will this year.
Yeah.
It probably honestly hurt them a little bit to get brought into that bubble playoff in this past summer. I mean, they probably would have helped them a little bit to be more around that 10, 11, 12 area, whether they end up with like an Askarov or whoever it may be. Where, where they would have picked if it would have been?
I think Edmonton picked 8th, right?
No, Edmonton was a little later. They got Dylan Holloway.
13, yeah.
I don't know where, but I think they would have been a higher pick than Edmonton, because it went by record once you were eliminated.
Yes.
I actually think they might have been top. They might have been in position to get like Marco Rossi or Cole Perfetti, honestly. And so,
Great.
those are big time prospects, whether it's those guys or whether it's Askarov or whatever. So, I mean, merging the windows is a tough trick to pull. And, Dallas kind of would be an example team of it. I mean, they kind of have this Ben Sagan, Radulov, I guess Bishop you could lump in that group. And then they also have kind of the young guys with Hintz and Guryanov and Heiskanen coming in, and you get the tail end of the Sagan window and the Ben window, and you get the opening of the Heiskanen window, and you have all those things at the same time, and you're going to go to the Cup final. And I don't think it was preordained that they were going to go to the Cup final. I mean, they could have easily been out in this conference semis, but that's the kind of thing that can happen when you have a nice blend of vets and you have a nice blend of young players. I don't think it always has to be kind of maybe the platonic ideal. And frankly, I think the Blackhawks are a big reason why, seems to be you have your stars who are the exact same age. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that's basically Kane, Taves, Keith, right? Like that's
Yeah.
A lot of people watch Kane, Taves, Keith win cups, and they were like, okay, well, now the Blackhawks are the team for a decade. And they kind of were, it wasn't every single year, but they were a threat for a decade, and or at least close to it. And then you had Panarin come in, and I'm sure you guys think all the time about what if that went a little different and he was still there. Yeah, that's a game changer. So it's a tough one to pull off, and I don't know if Chicago can do it in time to still have Kane being the player he is today. But can you do it while Kane's still a 65-point player, a 60-point player? I think you can. Can Jonathan Taves still be effective, even when he's not scoring? It certainly seems like he has managed to do that. And frankly, I think he even scored one of his better seasons within just the last year or two, hasn't he? Yeah.
Definitely.
So, these guys are superstars, and I think they age different. I think there's a different age curve for superstars. And I don't know if they can pull it off in time to be a champion again with those guys playing a leading role. But same deal with the Red Wings. You draft well, you develop well, you give yourself a shot. You don't, you got really no shot if you don't do those things well.
You mentioned earlier, it seems like a lot of these teams that are competing for like true contention for a cup, they have, the 1-2 punch at center. And, there are a couple teams around the league that still have that. Like, I think Washington has it with Kuznetsov and Backstrom. Pittsburgh has it with Crosby and Malkin. Obviously, the Red Wings are looking to Dylan Larkin as their top line center, but I don't think that as of right now they have like a guy who is going to be his equal playing second line center. If like, let's say Detroit was going to try to like really use him as a top line center and then just try to fill like depth around him on like the second and third lines, what players do you think out of their prospect pool in maybe 3 or 4 years might end up being those middle six guys, the guys who you need for depth scoring that close you out the occasional game or two?
So you're saying if they aren't able to find another center in their pipeline?
Yep.
Well, if that's the case, and I think your best move, for one, if you can't, it's a huge limiting factor. Like, I don't know that I can say that if you don't find another center who can be a first line caliber center, I don't know if you can win a cup if it's Larkin and then the drop off is really steep, and like that's a tough trick to pull. I mean, St. Louis won the cup with Ryan O'Reilly and Braden Shen, two awesome centers. Who won the cup is Tampa, Braden Point and Anthony Cirelli, two awesome centers. Like, I think you got to find another guy there, but if you don't, then your move is the Larkin Bertuzzi Mantha line is an awesome line, and I think you keep them together. And you hope that you can bring along Lucas Raymond and Philip Zadina to be kind of first line caliber players. And you surround whoever, your second center is with those two guys. And you say, okay, these guys are going to do a lot of the offensive lifting. Like, you need to keep things steady, help on D. Raymond's also a good two-way player. And I think Zadina can be too, frankly. I think he's a really smart player. So I think that's what I do. Maybe it's Veleno there, and you say, okay, Veleno, Raymond, Zadina. I think that can be a pretty good NHL second line, but I don't think it's as good as it would be if you're able to find, a high end center. Like, if you get another Larkin or whatever, you're able to, just looking at this next year's draft, Matt Beniers is one of the top centers. If you draft Matt Beniers and you plug him in there, like, you're in better shape if you can do that, obviously. So, but can you win games with a second line of Raymond, Veleno, Zadina? I think you could. Absolutely. Can you beat out a team that has, looking around the league, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes as their top two centers, what they're going to look like in 3 years from now with Alex Holtz on the wing? Well, now that's a tougher question. What about a Buffalo team that's going to have Jack Eichel and Dylan Cousins and, Jeff Skinner, Jack Quinn, Sam Reinhart on the wings? That's a tougher proposition, but you can hang in games. Can you go series after series and beat teams with two stud centers? That's tougher. So you've also got a guy like Jonathan Berggren as a prospect, since that's what I think you're asking about, in Sweden, who's kind of popped a little bit this year. He's at a point per game for Skellefteå in the Swedish league. Robert Mastrosimoni's a prospect that maybe you can get to kind of that third line level for Boston University, who can be kind of slippery and score and still play kind of that offensive style without, while still being, a real competitor. Who's the center of that line though? Is it Michael Rasmussen? Maybe that can work. I mean, I think Berggren can be your play driver from the wing if that's the case, and you can maybe make that work. And I mean, a lot of defensive responsibility that in that sense probably falls to Rasmussen, and that's that. But the Red Wings aren't in a position where I think if they just let their current prospect pool come of age and develop, that that's all you have to do. Like, you're going to need more pieces. You're going to need them on the blue line. You're going to need them at forward, specifically at center, in my opinion. And they don't have a goalie of the future either. I don't think, it's probably Chicago, same deal. So these are all things they have to address in the draft. They might have to address in free agency. And so I think those are some of the prospects that fans can be excited about. Berggren, Raymond, Rasmussen, Veleno, Mastrosimoni, those are all forward prospects that I believe in. And certainly Soderblom, who we mentioned earlier, he's trying to get on that radar. Theodor Niederbach is a name who maybe he can ascend and be that second line center. He might kind of have a little more offensive upside than a Joe Veleno when all comes to pass. But he's raw and they got to develop him. And so those are the prospects. I can't believe it took me that long to remember Niederbach. Frankly. Those are the prospects you're talking about if it's going to kind of resolve itself internally.
Okay. Now, I mean, one thing that I've kind of wondered, and this is actually a question that's really pertinent, I think, to the Wings and the Hawks for that matter. Usually when you're picking just, like those top 5 spots in the draft, a lot of teams just say best player available, and just because the ceilings on those players just is usually so much higher than the rest of the field. Do you think that the Wings and the Hawks, maybe within the next, 2 or 3 years worth of drafting, might say, as much as we want to take best player available, we need to have pieces that are pretty decent high-end pieces down the road for positions of need? I mean, I don't think really a lot of people saw Detroit taking more at Sider when they drafted him. And yet, he's turning into a really great player. At the time, that was a questionable pick, but now it looks like a fantastic one. And it's going to be a position Detroit really needs good players at.
Yeah, I mean, the dilemma you run into is that I think teams are always going to tell you they're picking the best player available. And in my opinion, I think it's not unfair to say that kind of value of position factors into who the best player available is. No matter what, like you might think that the winger is maybe a more skilled player, whatnot. He's going to score more points. Okay, great. If I'm an NHL GM and I need to find a scoring winger, I can find one every year in free agency and I can find one every trade deadline on the trade market. If I'm a GM and I need to find a top 6 centerman, it's hard to find those guys like as free agents or even in trades without giving up something really remarkable. And so I think the same can go for like a young top pair defenseman. And so was Moritz Seider the most skilled player on the board when Detroit took him? No, Trevor Zegras was on the board, right? But Moritz Seider is a 6'4" right-handed defenseman who's mean. He skates well. He's smart. Yeah, that's a really valuable player. I can't say that Moritz Seider has no shot to be as valuable as Trevor Zegras could be in the NHL. I mean, Trevor Zegras seems to be a hockey genius from when I watch him. He is remarkably skilled. And he might end up being a better player, and Detroit might end up thinking, oh, well, maybe they should have done that. But, I think Seider's looks like right now a good pick. I think he looks like that's a fair par value pick at 6th overall. And if he becomes a top pair defenseman, I don't think anyone's going to complain about it one way or the other. So when I look at the Red Wings, I see they've picked in the top 5 4 straight years now, or top 10 4 straight years now. They picked one center, and that's Michael Rasmussen. They got to pick another center while they're in the top 10 because that's the best place that you can go to find these top 6 centers. I look at they picked in the top 10 in the last 4 years. They picked one defenseman. That's Moritz Seider. He looks like a stud. They got to get another one. So I think they're going to be picking in the top 10 this year. They're probably going to be picking in the top 10 next year. In my opinion, you should be doing whatever you can to get a D and a center out of those 2 drafts. There's a ton of D in the top 10 this year from what it looks like, at least 3 or 4. There should be at least one center in the top 10, maybe 2. Try everything you can to get one of those. And if William Eklund or Dylan Guenther is really that good and you think, okay, this guy is a star on the wing, then you got to do it because that's what it is. But unless that winger is a whole head above the center of the D, I think as a GM, I would factor in the positional value because as much as you want the best player available, that is a way more complicated label than I think anyone maybe realizes, but is often led to believe, I guess is the word I should say.
Okay. Completely agree. I know we're running low on time. I just want to get one last thought on this season. It's pretty cliche, but what do you see as a Stanley Cup final this year for 2021?
It's a great one. Well, it's hard to pick against Tampa, especially because it sounds like maybe they get Kucherov back when the playoffs start. Vegas added Pietrangelo. That's hard to overlook. I'm going to say Colorado out of the West. I love what they're building. Nathan McKinnon is a megastar. Cale Makar looks like he's on his way. I don't know if Bowen Byram makes the team this year, but he's looked great in the World Juniors to my eye. And I'll pick Tampa to go back. They're just so talented. It's Hedman,
so
it's
much fun
Point.
Gosh.
So Tampa, Colorado, and I have to say, I will enjoy every minute of that
Oh,
series.
yeah. You already got me excited thinking about that.
Yeah, that's a dream final to watch.
Yep.
If that does happen, we'll have to have you on again just to give you lottery numbers from you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I get props for picking 2 of the 3 best teams in the league to go to the Cup final, but I'll come on again, no problem.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Max.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was nice having you on, Max. We appreciate you coming onto the show and just giving us a little bit of your time. Again, for anybody who's watching or listening, feel free to check out Max's work on The Athletic. I mentioned it at the top of the show, but The Athletic is a fantastic place for sports journalism. Really, you guys do a fantastic job of covering not just hockey, but the NFL, the NBA, all sorts of major sports.
Premier League, everything.
Yeah.
Literally, if whatever sport you're on, The Athletic has it. There's plenty of great coverage on all the pro teams. And the best part is it's really affordable. You guys are always having sales and stuff on membership. I think it's $40 a year I pay for. That is more than worth it. And you guys put out great content. You guys are a fantastic outlet. And Also, check out Max's his podcast, Wings for Breakfast, because again, great content. It's great to have somebody in an organization putting out content that is more than just, the stuff online that's sort of clickbaity, like really in-depth analytical stuff. And I want to appreciate and thank you guys for putting that out for us.
Well, that's really kind of you to say, Jordan. I really appreciate that, and keep doing what you guys are doing. Keep doing the show, and I know for me, like the podcast has been a blast, and this has been fun to do too. So I hope you guys are having as much fun on it as I had coming on today.
Absolutely, we're glad to have you, Max. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, take care, guys.
All right, thank you, Max. You have a good evening.
Happy New Year.
You too.